let's look at some of the ways that within group variability can obscure group differences. So it may be that there's not enough variability between our different groups or between levels. That might be that there's an ineffective manipulation of the independent variable. Maybe there's, maybe there's an insufficiently sensitive measurement of the dependent variable. Perhaps there's ceiling or floor effects from either the independent variable or dependent variable. Our within group variability can obscure group differences. So we might have a real difference and we just can't see it. So in the last video, we talked about comparing different interventions for to help people with suicidal thoughts, and we found no difference. So here, what I want you to be thinking about is why. So it could be that within group variability obscures group differences. So there's so much overlap between them that we're just unable to see what's going on here. And you see that in these two different figures, that this particular figure going with this, we're seeing so much variability right here, the variance within group, that it's hard to see the difference between these two groups. Notice that their error bars for the confidence intervals are not overlapping, or are overlapping, as opposed to this figure where we're seeing very small confidence intervals, which allow us to see the differences between groups. I'm going with this particular figure. So there are a number of different things that might happen. It might be that there's not enough variability between groups or between levels. Maybe we haven't significantly, we don't have a good manipulation of the independent variable. Perhaps the idea of just hasn't been well tested, or perhaps we don't have a sensitive enough measurement of the dependent variable. How are they measuring self-injurious behavior and suicidal thoughts? Particularly as people are not very good at reporting these. Perhaps there are ceiling or floor effects from our independent variable, or ceiling or floor effects from our dependent variable that just makes it difficult to see differences even when they're there. Sometimes we might have too much variability within levels. And we're going to talk about a number of things here, but keep in mind that we have these groups that are very variable. And if we had less variability within the group, we'd be able to see those differences better. So we're going to look at measurement error, individual differences, and situation noise. With measurement error, there are a number of things that we can do. We can use more reliable and precise measurements, perhaps rather than measuring in terms of feet, we want to measure in terms of inches, maybe rather than a yes or no, We want to have it to measure suicidality on a 7-point scale. Maybe we want more instances. Maybe we want a larger sample size. So with individual differences, those individual differences may make it difficult to see whether our reinforcement impacts mood because those individual differences are spread out. However, one way of responding to this is to use a matched or within groups design, either one. This is a within groups design. And you can see that for most participants, there was some improvement with mood with the reinforcement. Second solution is to add more participants. With a smaller sample size, it's harder to see any difference. And yet with a larger sample size, we can see those changes much more readily, or the effect of our intervention. Situation noise can also influence it. Perhaps there's a noisy or distracting environment, and so people aren't able to pay enough attention to the intervention, or perhaps it slows down reaction time. Anything that we can do to minimize the experiments, those external factors can perhaps decrease within group variability. So obscuring factors might, here's a third way of approaching it. If the study was sound, it doesn't have confounds, we have a good independent variable, good dependent variable, strong enough dose of our intervention, perhaps we have a good sample size, maybe the independent variable just doesn't have much impact on our dependent variable. And so what we're going to want to do is think about what the body of evidence suggests. Is that consistent with it? Maybe this is a chance null finding. So even when there is a true difference, we may not see it just by chance. So what we've been talking about today is really addressing these two variables, the variability of our groups. And we're also going to be thinking, we've also talked about sample size. In both cases, the confidence interval becomes narrower, more precise, and it becomes easier to see a real difference if there's a real difference. Now, we've talked about the sugar high several times over the course of this semester. And most parents and teachers will tell you that there's really an effect of a sugar high. Woolrich et al. Tested normal preschoolers and children whose parents described them as being sensitive to sugar. Neither the parents nor the children nor the research staff knew which of the children were getting sugary foods, which were getting artificial sweeteners. They were looking at, they did some manipulation checks to make sure that in fact they were eating the prescribed diet. That's what the urine tests were for. And they did 9 different measures of cognitive and behavioral performance with measurements taken at 5-second intervals. All of this concluded no effect. Now, in this case, no effect is an important finding. But you want to be extremely careful in terms of how you're gathering data, how you're testing those children to make sure that you have ruled out all of those other kinds of variables that might explain what we're seeing here. So take care and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.